Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, The Joyful Frugalista, and now here's your host, Serina Bird.
Yuma Frugalistas, and welcome. Today I'm actually going to be your special guest, and I'm really excited to be chatting with you because I really haven't had a chat for a while. So what's been happening with me? Oh, that's right. We're celebrating the 100th episode of the podcast. Well, actually, technically it's 101 because one of them is an abundance meditation, but most of them are interviews, and there's even a special interview with my husband, Neil. Actually, there's even an even more special interview where he decides to be the interviewer and he interviews with me. And that was actually pretty fun because it's not often that you get your husband to ask you questions like that. And I wasn't actually quite sure what he was going to ask. I really want to reflect back on these 101 episodes, and I really want to thank you, the listeners, for listening to me and making this podcast just so successful. As I record this, there's over 116,000 downloads. Wow. My mind is a little bit blown by that because when I first launched this podcast, you wonder whether anyone will listen. It's always a thing. You put it out there, you spread the word, you record these things, you put hours and hours and hours into it, and then you think, oh, does anyone actually listen to this? Then I bump into people who tell me how much they've enjoyed episodes, and it really, really helps. So I actually want to ask you for something, which is if you really do enjoy this podcast, and I know I say this all the time, please, please, please tell someone, leave a comment, leave a review, send me a message. Send me a message on Instagram or on Facebook because it does really make such a difference. In this episode particularly where it's just me chatting, like you sort of don't really know if it makes a difference, but it does. So when I started this podcast, the first episode was released in early March 2020. And I remember that because just about 2 weeks prior to that, we'd gone on a road trip to Melbourne. So we'd driven down from Canberra to Melbourne. Now, in itself, that might not seem so significant, but as most of us know, the borders shut then in mid-March. In fact, most of Australia and much of the world shut down as we went into pandemic lockdown. But in mid-February, when we made that road trip, it sort of felt like it was just something strange that was happening in China or other places in the world, but would never get to Australia. It was really hard to imagine that happened. And when we made this road trip, I decided that we would record some podcasts with some people I knew. And the first guest was the wonderful Late Starter Fire. And her podcast for a long time was actually the most popular one. Now, if you haven't checked out the writings of Late Starter Fire, make sure you do because she's fabulous. I've since had her back, which was great. She actually blogged about the experience and talked about how she was so scared, like crazy scared, but that thankfully I made her feel welcome. I didn't actually realize that she was that scared, but I'm so glad she shared, and I'm so glad that she did feel welcome. I also got to interview my lovely auntie, Julie, and I wanted to interview her because I know that she really did it tough, her and her family, during the early stages of the recession that we had to have. Now, I had no idea we were going into COVID and cost of living crises, but I knew she had a really strong story of resilience. And in fact, a lot of her sort of habits and things that she did to get through that difficult time really stuck with me when I went through my difficult times when I was suddenly single. So I really wanted to hear her message, and it was just so authentic and it was just wonderful. And then we had Jason, who talked about how he bought property when he was at university and went forward from there. So, managed to actually make a lot from property sort of before he even got his first professional job, which is really fascinating. I've been so honoured by the amazing, amazing people that have been on the podcast. With 100 podcasts, notwithstanding the fact that a few, not many, are by me and a few by Neil, it's really hard to remember everyone and to thank everyone. But I really do want to thank all of my guests. Some of my guests are famous, some of them are authors, some of them are family, and some of them are friends. But I want to ask you now, as the listener, do you have a story to tell? Would you like to be my guest on this podcast? Or do you have an awesome guest to recommend? If so, please leave a comment either on Facebook or Instagram to talk about why you would like to be a guest or who you would like to be a guest, because I'd be super honoured. I also have someone very special to thank for this podcast, and that is my wonderful husband, Neil. Some of you may or may not know that Neil is my podcast producer, which is a very fancy way of saying that he usually sits with me when I record, as he is doing now, and he always edits my podcasts. He's been known to say, "God, I make you sound good." And he's right, because he gets rid of all the ums and ahs and the ticks and the, like that I'm known to say on podcasts. And he's the one who makes sure that it sounds so smooth. And also too, I know he does this as a sort of way to show that he loves me, and I really want to tell him how much I appreciate that. And if you appreciate the work of Neil, do leave a comment and tell Neil that he is awesome, because I'm sure he would really like to hear that as well. So you might wonder why I have been so quiet this year, particularly the first half of the year. I reached 100,000 downloads early in January, I think, or just around New Year's. So reached that milestone, and then sort of things slowed down. Well, two things happened, but one of them I really want to share with you because I'm super excited. And that is that I wrote another book. So How to Pay Your Mortgage Off in 10 Years, even when interest rates are going up, will be in the bookstores from 25th of July this year. So it's a very timely book, and I hope you'll really like it. I really had to think deeply about this one because as someone who's paid off a mortgage, I had to remember back to the tricks and tips that I used when I was going through this. And I really wanted to make it a practical book, a compassionate book, and a book that didn't sound preachy or that sounded like I was talking down to people who are struggling with mortgage stress, because this is something that is really very real for people. Many people are really struggling with the way the interest rates have just gone up so quickly, and it's caught a lot of people out. And I totally understand that too. I'm still shocked at how my own mortgage from my investment properties, or our investment properties, has really gone up quite quickly. And it does take a fair bit out of the mortgage. And I know a lot of people have been caught in this, that they saw that property prices were going up so quickly. People felt that they had to get in, that if they didn't get in, that they might miss out. And so consequently they did, and then they thought it would be okay because interest rates would be low, but they've gone up. There's lots of tips and tricks, as I said. There's lots of hacks. There's lots of finance hacks. But there's also some information about what to do should you find yourself in a difficult financial situation. So the real hint there is don't panic. Definitely don't panic. I've also included lots of new frugal tips and tricks, including some cleaning hacks that I'm particularly proud of that I think you will enjoy, that are both environmental and also economical and affordable. So there's lots of Frugalista tips, and there's a chapter on travel. I know some people wrote to me after the Joyful Frugalista was published to say, "Serina, you didn't put any travel tips in." And I was planning to write about that again, but then something called COVID happened and no one could travel. But as it happens, we've actually travelled a little bit recently ourselves, so I've had a little bit of experience to draw on in that regard. Because let's face it, even though paying off a mortgage is a priority, we still want to live. Everyone needs a break, and so I wanted to put it into balance. I really want to thank, with this book, Leslie Williams from Major Street Publishers for this opportunity. Now, like I said just before, I've been very quiet for a long time because I was writing a book. Because, a funny thing happened this year. Writing a book was not on my plan. It wasn't on my New Year's plan at all. In fact, I was planning to have a Zen year. I was planning to simplify my life a little bit, let go of a few things, do more meditation, and definitely not write another book. And something else happened in January too, which is I went back to work full time for various reasons other than I was sort of approached by a friend. It was a great job. It felt like it was something meaningful. And I went, okay, we'll just see how it goes. And oddly enough, I'm finding I'm really enjoying it. So there I was back in full-time work, really enjoying it, really coming to grips with reconciling where I was previously and moving forward and going, yeah, actually, it's really nice to use my professional skills, not planning to write a book. When Leslie contacts me and says, hey, would you like to write a book and would you like to write a book quickly? Well, I've never written a book so fast in my life, and originally it was going to be a fairly small book, but it ended up being a lot larger than I intended, which anyone who's a writer knows has a tendency to happen. So with all of that happening, plus with 2 children at home and a few other things, I haven't been as active on the podcast as I have been previously. But rest assured, I'm still very much a podcaster and I'm looking forward to doing more. But back to the book. I'm super proud of this book. I'm super happy for this book, and I really believe it's going to help a lot of people. A lot of parents particularly are struggling about how to help their children, their adult children, either get into the property market or manage their finances. And sadly, not everyone has grown up with good financial skills themselves, good knowledge of financial literacy, let alone the ability to share this with their children. So we're finding particularly that a lot of parents are buying this book for their children. And the book is coming out right in time for Father's Day. So if you have a father in your life or maybe a relative who's a father, this is a perfect gift. It's available for pre-purchase now through Booktopia, Amazon, or many other bookstores. And pre-purchasing is really important because it sends a strong signal to independent bookstores and other bookstores that this book is in demand. And to the publishers. So the publishers will go, wow, people really want to read this book. We'll print more, we'll make more available. And of course, if you're environmentally conscious, you can always order an ebook. That's always an option for you as well. But a lot of people like to read my books through the library, and that is fantastic. That is wonderful. And of course, there is a scheme where you do get the public lending rights, and I get a little bit of money from that. But I must honestly say that if you buy a book, if you support a creative artist in Australia, whether it's in personal finance or any other genre, fiction or non-fiction, it's really significant. The publishing industry has done it tough, and so have a lot of creatives. So if you borrow a book at the library and you really enjoy it, that's wonderful, but consider giving it as a gift to someone else to spread the joy around. So once again, thank you so very much for supporting my podcast, supporting my books. This will be my 3rd one. And I wish you all the very best for a joyfully frugal 2023. Wishing you much abundance and much love. Serina.
You've been listening to The Joyful Frugalista with Serina Bird. And of course, sound has been by Neil Hadley.
The boats float by. You could talk, and I would listen. I would understand your mind. Oh, I'd love to be with you, walking toward the sea, and the times when I stars.